Ron DeSantis took another step towards running for president today. He says he wants to ban Chinese or hostile foreign investors from owning property in the Sunshine State.
You know, we don't want to have holdings by hostile nations. And so if you look at the Chinese Communist Party, they've been very active throughout the Western Hemisphere in gobbling up land and investing in different things.
It's the latest DeSantis move that feels a little bit more presidential than governor-esque. Erick Erickson is here, host of the Erick Erickson Show, writer of conservative Substack's smartest newsletter. I would also venture best. Good to see you, my friend. Thank you. How many times is Ron DeSantis going to announce something that is purely done to cut a great commercial in Iowa?
You know, listen, this is a really good tactic because for all the media bellyaching that he's not spending time with them, everyone's covering this topic. And by the way, I've got to say, it's one I actually have been paying attention to for a while. And it's nice to see it's not just him. There are also Democratic governors out there who are less media savvy at getting attention, who are really taking this issue on. And so good for him.
Yeah, no, it's an important issue, too, especially when it comes not only to Chinese investment in real estate, but Chinese investment in farmland and places near military installations. You wonder why the federal government isn't taking this up. That's a different story. But I think about, you talk about the coverage comparison. New York Times about Ron DeSantis. Can Ron DeSantis avoid meeting the press? And they dragged him for not having done any national interviews. The New York Times, when Joe Biden was running from his basement, how can Joe Biden defeat Trump from his basement? The long knives are already out for Ron DeSantis. Is the establishment media decided he is the de facto frontrunner?
Yeah, I think so. This really does remind me a lot of between 1998 and 2000, after George W. Bush flipped Texas and made a blue state solidly red. People forget it was a blue state in the 90s, except for the presidential election. Suddenly, all the Republicans gravitated. The media hit jobs on George W. Bush from 1998 to 2000 were more against him than all other Republican governors combined. We're starting to see the same phenomenon with Ron DeSantis, where much of the mainstream media feels like it's time to start digging into this guy who probably is going to be the nominee. They have an additional incentive to dig into him because he doesn't want to talk to them.
Can that work as a strategy long term?
Yeah, I actually think it can in large part because disproportionately on TV, you've got conservative news outlets that are, I mean, have more viewers than CNN and MSNBC combined. You've got a large independent contingent of people who don't necessarily read the New York Times. The New York Times itself tends to now skew more and more towards its Upper West Side and Upper East Side subscribers and how they cover the news. So you do want these news outlets to start covering stories. Like I, as a conservative talk show host, still have to read the New York Times and Washington Post every day. But there are so many other outlets by which you can get your message out. It's not as necessary to engage in them.
Yeah, it's a very different world than 1998 when George W. Bush was running for president and started that. Ron DeSantis fundraising raised $217 million for his reelection bid, way outraised Donald Trump, who obviously wasn't running, but in terms of his PAC and the like. Is Ron DeSantis at risk of becoming another Republican governor who did a number of the same things, was fighting the culture wars in the same way DeSantis is about CRT and other things? It was different in Wisconsin. That was Scott Walker.
You know, it's possible. We don't know yet. And, you know, the big difference between George W. Bush between 98 and 2000 and Ron is, well, George H.W. Bush wasn't trying to beat his son to get back to the White House. And Donald Trump, of course, wants to get back to the White House. But, you know, also you're seeing this gravitational shift even among a lot of Trump supporters towards DeSantis. There's a hardcore base. And, of course, Donald Trump being an announced candidate gets him some level of clarity in people's minds that he's running when DeSantis doesn't. I do think, though, you're starting to see a real dynamic shift. Part of that is the donor class as well, which is more aligned with Ron DeSantis. And the donor class will have a lot to say in who gets a lot of money up front to be able to move forward and build their name.
Yeah, especially if the donor class is able to be cohesive, which
right.
they never have been in the past, but we can all hope. Or Republicans can hope. Thanks for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to subscribe. Click the red button to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.